Got
Well,
it.
as I said in my intro, this week I have as my guest Brittany Walter, and I had the pleasure of meeting Brittany at the Recovery Festival on King's College's campus, and she was one of three wonderful speakers who shared their recovery stories. And I was fortunate enough to get Brittany's time. I said, I'd love to share your story on my podcast because I think it is important that we talk about these things that we're not talking about enough, really, especially this time of year. Before I hit the record button, Brittany and I were talking about, it's Thanksgiving and then the holidays, and there's, a lot of people see this, what's on TV and the Lifetime stories and the Hallmark stories, and it's like not everything looks the same. Not all families look the same, or not family doesn't have to mean the same thing to everyone or the same type of people. Friends are family too, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think it's important that we have these kind of conversations. So I want to say thank you to Brittany for joining me, and welcome. Hi, Brittany.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. I think it was very brave of you and Dylan, and I think Brian, or it was the other gentleman that shared your stories, because again, we need to hear from people who are willing to be vulnerable and strong at the same time and to share the story. So, because there are people out there going through something, and if we don't share these stories, they feel like they're alone. So I want to thank you for sharing your story. Before we get into that, I guess I want to ask you first. So let's just talk about where you're at now in your life. We're going to I just want to work a little bit backwards. So right now you're healthy, you are married, and I think you have a child.
Yes, I have a 7-year-old little boy named Mattis, and
And
I've
you
been married for 6 years now. Yes,
you
I
have
think
to
six.
think about, and you have some
We
rescue
never
dogs.
remember. Yes, yeah, we were just talking because I have our newest one here in the room with me. We just got her a few days ago, but we have 3 different rescue dogs, all big, nice pit mixes that are couch hippos and loving, and they're just a lot, a lot of everything.
But I'm sure they're really helpful as far as that whole, like, with pet therapy, like that nice feeling, to come home to a
Yeah.
dog.
Yeah, we laugh, especially with 3 now. There's 3 humans and 3 dogs, and we all definitely have ours, but it's a known thing between my family and everybody in our lives that Kiesel, who is our first, is my baby. And there's nothing breaking that. And I say all the time, I don't know what I would have ever done without him. The past few years, to feel somebody who just unconditionally loves you is so strange. And it actually ties perfectly in, because to feel that after never feeling that is so strange, but it's so relieving to just lay down and just feel so connected to something that isn't even a human, and you just know that they love you so much and you love them. And I like could cry any moment I think about the fact that he's not going to live forever, but that's how we are with all 3 of them. We have our own little bonds with each. But animals for therapy, the best thing in the entire world.
Now, are these all three? I know your recent one, excuse me, is a rescue. Are all 3 rescues?
Yes. Yeah. Very different backgrounds in all 3 different rescues. We had Kiesel from Blue Chip. He came from the South. We have Echo, who was our second, and she was from the Northeast Rough Dog Rescue. She was pulled very early. She's our princess. That's what we call her, because she was lucky enough to get put right into a foster home. That was wonderful for her. I think we were told 8 weeks. Her and my son actually share the same birthday, which is what drew us to her. And she is my son's dog, 100%. And now the third one we just got actually from Rescue Pets Serving Vets, who do free adoptions for vets. And my husband is a veteran. He was in the Marines, and so they do great things too. So we just got her, like I said, Saturday. We went to an event, and then we went up to the rescue and we found her, and she's now laying on a nice big king size bed.
Oh my gosh, that's great. And that's a lot of love you have there in that household.
Yes, a lot of love in a not gigantic house. So it's like overspilling in good ways, at least.
That's good. That's great. So you're doing well now. You're healthy. Let's go back, because I know I saw you, like I said, at the Recovery Festival. I want to let you tell your story, however you want to tell it. I know you've had some struggles with mental health. and you could tell us your story and then talk a little bit about the family dynamics, because as I mentioned, before we hit the record button, we were saying about like family was what you'll hear about now with Thanksgiving through the holidays. And unfortunately, we're really not at that level yet in society where we accept easily that friends can be family just as much, and that sometimes blood relatives are not always the best in your life to have, that there can be like toxic relationships, and it's okay to kind of sever ties when you need to. So I think it's important for people to understand that and to hear your story. So I'll let you just tell what it was like when you were younger, and the struggles you went through, and what role the family played in that.
Yeah. I I'm one of four siblings, and I grew up in what I always believed to be a very normal family upbringing, especially for, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, middle class family, everything. And, you're brought into these worlds where you assume that what your world is what everybody else's is. Unfortunately, my family, although there was never any extreme, I like to say, purposeful ill intentions. You have parents who are just emotionally not available, and who also mixed with issues of not believing in mental health and not speaking of mental health. Uh, it's just kind of bred a lot of issues between growing up and what you thought was normal. Um, their emotional capacity was just not there. So, when you start growing up and you're talking to other families, you mention something like getting hit by a 2x4 as a form of punishment. And people look at you like, what is going on? Why is that a thing? And I'm like, everybody does that, right? Like, that's just how it works. Or, a lot of the mental things, you could get woken up in the morning at 3 o'clock in the morning to fix things that aren't perfect, and you're always on edge with that. I definitely grew up without realizing the type of love that other parents gave, and I know that they gave the love that they had, which is also a lot to understand and process too. Now is, again, they didn't mean any harm directly. They never wanted to see past where they were and their capacity that they had. And that's a part that is very difficult. I actually have borderline personality disorder. It is different than bipolar disorder. A lot of people kind of mix them because they sound similar. Mine is actually caused by trauma. And it is usually an issue with abandonment. In my case, it is an emotional abandonment. I never had that connection. And it's hard for me to understand there's good and bad in everyone. And it's a lot of black and white thinking. And you can get to a gray with people. And so getting to that point with my family has helped a lot. But as I grew up, I have always had struggles. And that is where being diagnosed with BPD, it makes more sense because it did start so young. I was 9 or 10 years old, and I remember not wanting to be alive. I didn't understand what that meant, but I just didn't want to be anything anymore. And it's so sad to think back at that little kid who had nobody to really think, to say it to feel like you were emotionally connected enough that it mattered, because it was not spoken about in my family. It was, you toughen up. There is no reason for crying. It wasn't spoken about in schools. It wasn't spoken about in, I did lots of sports and activities and things like that. And you were never told about anything like that. So even at that young age, you have those feelings, but in a home where feelings were not brought up and talked about, you just took it and did something with it. And I mean, I did a lot of inward stuff. I loved just doing puzzles and reading and things like that. But for me, my response to it was I became a fixer. I was you could tell the second somebody walks in a door what their personality is. And if you should immediately start cleaning, if you should stay out of their way, if you should be helpful. I mentioned I have siblings, and we all did it slightly differently, and we're all about 5 years apart. So we all had very different ideas of growing up. If anybody has siblings, by the last one, you're like, "Oh, mom and dad just like totally let them get away with everything." But me and my little brother definitely had very similar struggles. We were in the middle. And it's definitely very difficult for men to be able to express their feelings. Growing up, no matter what, and even now, it's so sad to see when it's like, be a man, boys don't cry, things like that. It's kind of ingrained in their head, especially if they are in sports and they're doing, they enjoy the typical masculine stuff. It's, well, that's your personality. You do not take in the sadness, and being angry is better for men, in some way. That's what they believe, most people believe. But so while I was struggling, my little brother was also struggling, and we didn't speak of these things. So there are certain whole parts of his story that I don't actually know. I know that he was admitted into First Hospital. He was pretty young. He was on the children's floor. I do believe he said something at school or something along those lines, and he was put into First Hospital, a mental health hospital, for a week. And it was never spoken about again when he left. No family members spoke of it. Family members did not speak about it to their friends. It was like it didn't happen, so that nobody would know, like a hush hush type of thing. I always say mental health is like what cancer was 50 years ago. Nobody wants to speak about it. It's like a bad, dirty word. Suicide is even worse right now. I watch people kind of cringe a little bit on the inside because I so freely say the word suicide, because it's a thing, and it kills a lot of people. But so he had his issues. He was also sent away to a camp at one point. I don't really know what kind of camp. I think it was just because his idea of his trauma turned into being bad, like the revolting against everything, stealing a car and going joyriding. We took it very different, and most families do. Everybody finds their own way of getting through trauma. But I then had my first true suicide attempt. I say it true because with borderline personality disorder, I'm very impulsive. So I do know that there was quite a few times in between where it was almost as though it was, I want to die, and I would take a few pills, but it was never an attempt fully. But when I was 13, I tried to kill myself for the first time. I was a freshman in high school, and it was the first week of school, and things just snowballed really quickly. I don't even remember what exactly it was about. I took as many pills as I could find, and I then was sick for the next week. Nobody in my family knew, or if they did know, they didn't care enough to, actually say it. I pretty much lived off of baby food for that week because I couldn't stomach anything, and I missed a whole week of school, and it was just kind of swept under the rug that I was sick. Nobody knew what was what. And then there was, I have like some stuff written down. You were at the event where I had them like written on my
Hey, and you did great though. I mean, and this is your story. This is,
yeah, it was that was a lot for me. But after that, I mean, I kind of just self-medicated between 13 to 20. I was growing up, and I was left to my own devices because, again, my family was just, they're not emotionally available. And as being one of the older of the four, I was pretty much left to just, if I can come home with good grades and not get in trouble, I didn't have to come home for a few days, check in every now and again. And, then I had this great sense of my parents let me do whatever I want.
Mm.
And now I look back and I think to myself, like, I couldn't imagine with my son. Like, I want him to have freedom, but I mean, I was just completely disconnected. And in a way it was good. I was no longer there 24/7 to be on edge, to be the fixer of everything. But um, it was definitely a lot. Um, I did anything. I remember being as young as 13, 14, being completely blackout drunk. And I tell some of these stories to my therapist, and I'm like, that's just what everybody does, right? Like, you start like that and you end up binge drinking, and I feel like you get that way because you surround yourself with those same people. Um, so for me to tell some of the stories, how I was alcohol poisoning at 16 in a house with a bunch of 21 to 24-year-olds, I'm thankful and so lucky that nothing ever really happened. There's so many scary times where I was so impulsive and just so looking for an attachment that, I mean, I could have been very seriously hurt. I could have,
Mm.
there's so many possibilities of what could have happened, and thankfully it didn't. But um, it's that eventually led to um, my second and final suicide attempt. I was 20 years old, and it is unfortunately a lot of people the same way. This time of year really strains on people. I actually do worse December, January, February. I don't like the cold. I don't like the smushy
Yeah.
cold wetness. And seasonal depression on top of, my already undiagnosed at the time mental health. At that time, I was kind of an advocate, even not being in therapy and performing for myself. I was very vocal. But again, I had an impulsive night, and I found as many Tylenol PMs as I could. And I planned on not waking up the next morning. I was speaking to a friend who was thankfully aware of my past, and she was my best friend. She knew everything. Uh, and she came and she got me, and I left my parents' house with nobody realizing that there was any issues. We sat in the Geisinger parking lot for a few hours, crying a lot. And then I finally went in and I was admitted to First Hospital. Uh, I was 20, so I wasn't a child legally. Uh, I had my parents did show up once. And they also showed up for like a voice call at the end, where you have to, show that there's a supportive family, and you have somewhere to go. And they just know the right things to say. And unfortunately, that is one of those, they perform. People who don't
Mm.
believe in it, they do anything they can to not let it tarnish what they are, or what they want people to think that they are. So they say what they need to say. And I used to do it. I used to say what I needed to say to get out of certain situations. I knew what to say to school counselors, or um, but so after the week, they threw on a diagnosis of bipolar, threw on a diagnosis of depression, set up a few appointments for afterwards, but with no real guidance outside of there. I never showed up to any appointments. Um, Again, it was never spoken about in my family. Uh, Nobody knew that that's where I was for the week. It was completely just swept under the rug that, you have now two children who have attempted suicide. Um, it was still, mental health is, fake, that therapists just want your money. Why don't you just go for a run? It'll make you feel better. Um, Not acknowledging it then made you feel even crazier.
Mm.
Um, my therapist hates the word crazy, and I love it, because sometimes that's just how you feel. You're just, you're kind of just a little nuts.
Yeah.
You people are telling you all these things aren't real. People who are supposed to be the people that you turn to, and it's not okay. And then I did try a few times after that to reach out to different places, and even the stigma inside of the community of a young girl going to get help, you know, a lot of the times either they didn't know what to do with me because with my diagnosis, my mood swings are very quick, versus again, people mix it with bipolar where they're manic for a long time and then very depressed. Mine are very impulsive and triggering. So I can be a very happy and bubbly person. And then something triggers me, and all of a sudden, I want to kill myself. And so when you go into therapy and they're talking to you, and it's not going to be a long-term thing, they are just, it's just a hump you have to get over. You know, it's just a phase. It's just, your hormones, or it's just, and it was either they didn't want to see it, or I was able to give them the right answers.
Mm.
If you don't feel that trust, you just give the right answers.
Oh yeah.
Which is really not like that's not how you want it to work, but
No, but you have to feel like you trust the person that you're talking to. Yeah.
yes, yeah, and you need to know that they're there to help you. And sometimes it just isn't given off that way.
Mm.
And I know that all professionals try, obviously, 100%. My diagnosis is a difficult one to actually understand, because I am so easily just bubbly and happy. um, I was, though, like I said, I've always been somebody who wants to break down all the stigmas with mental health. So even after my own attempt, and like I said, going back and forth, trying to get my own therapist and, getting on meds. I did go through a few different meds that never seemed to do anything. So I would just stop. Later, as in now, I found out that it was just the kinds. They did nothing, so it was very easy for me to just stop and not feel anything. And that's another thing, is a lot of people think that it can be a very quick fix, and it's not. It can take 6 to 8 weeks for something to start. But it also might never start. You might have to change a few different pills, or be in there. I've been in therapy for 3 years now, and I joke that I will be there until my dying day every Thursday for an hour. But it's very tough to get started and to keep going. And I kind of put it on the back burner. Like I did. Then I got married and I had a baby. So Mattis is 7 now. So I got into this blur of just postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. You're working full time and you have a baby at home, and you're also trying to be a wife, and then you have a dog and a house, and you kind of put yourself last. And then October 24th, 2018, my little sister called me to let me know that she found my little brother dead. He completed suicide. And my whole brain just kind of shut off for a little bit. Obviously, throughout that next year was a complete blur. Those hours afterwards was just panic. My parents weren't even in the state at the time, so we had to let them know. It was a lot. I am, like I said, the fixer. So I was the one who was, making sure. Even then, I was cleaning up the dishes that were in the house because I knew people were going to be coming over, trying to help the police with anything that they needed. And it definitely turned things for me. It did take about a year, but then I was able to find my therapist, and she is absolutely wonderful. From therapy, I was able to then start with my psychiatrist, who the team of them had properly diagnosed me with BPD. And I've been on medication for the 3 years, as well as therapy for the 3 years. I, even still to this day, though, my family doesn't belief in mental health somehow.
Mm.
They have multiple children who have attempted. They have one who has committed suicide himself. Um, I've never heard them say the word suicide. They do not speak of how he died. Um, it's just very like it just it makes me very angry. Um, because they still just don't want that to be something on their lives.
Mm.
Um, and I can't imagine losing my son. I also know that I am and have been and always will be do everything I can to make sure that something like mental health is not something that he has to feel he can't speak to me about. Um, I still am an advocate. Obviously, I'm speaking right now. I've done photography projects to bring awareness to how suicide affects people. I just recently did a car show that I was able to raise almost $5,000 for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Wow, that's wonderful. That's
Yeah,
great.
that was a very fun event and nice, and but it's still very sad because they won't show up to things like that. Um, or if they do, it's a very quick pop in, hi, very cool, goodbye. Um, they just don't want to be associated, I don't believe, with that image. Um, and it's just so saddening. But the toxicity of going through everything, and then these past 3 years of therapy and seeing it, because I never did before. Um, it's very difficult. You know, you will always, no matter what, want the approval of your mom and dad.
Sure.
It
Yeah.
does not matter. It doesn't matter what they do or
Yeah.
how they do it. You will always want some type of approval. You will always want that love. It doesn't matter. Unfortunately, in some cases.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but you know, I've grown so much that I've learned that they they don't bring my life anything extra. Um, they cause a lot of stress. Do I ever wish any ill intentions towards them? Absolutely not. They they were growing up, you know, while they had us, and they were not emotionally capable of raising that many children or any children, or you know, they have their own issues that I could see, especially now as I'm older. Um, do I wish that they could have acknowledged more things? Absolutely. Obviously, I wish that there was a lot of things that could have been different. Um, I'm to my point in my life now, though, that I don't need them. Um, I will never keep them from my son. I have no reason for that. They've never done anything bad um, to him, or you know, it's nothing like that. But they just bring up too much negativity for my life. That we were speaking about holidays. I won't be there for Thanksgiving. COVID was wonderful. That was the best excuse ever to not have to go places.
I'm sure you're not the only person to say that too.
Yes, yes. So this was the first year that I really said, you know what? No, we're not going to be there. And I feel great. You know, but it's been a lot of years coming. You know, it's really difficult because it's so hard to make that kind of cut.
Mm.
Even if it's hard, I know people who have it much, much more difficult as far as um, relationships with family, and they're not ready. You know, they might not never be ready
Yeah.
to completely cut that tie. Like I said, you're always going to want your mom's love. You're always going to want your dad's approval. But for me, my biggest thing is my happiness and my lessened anxiety. My son sees it. You know, he knows that I am healthy. We both go to therapy. He loves to call therapists quiet doctors. um,
Oh, that's great.
yes, my therapist loves that because when I first started, every now and again I would bring him with me, and he would have to be quiet. And he would bring his little headphones and get to watch the iPad for the hour. So he would always ask, like, "Are we going to your quiet doctor?" But even now, he has his own. Um, we are a family that speaks openly. He asked about my brother. I explain it to the best of my ability to a 7-year-old. He understands that his brain was sick, and there were just certain things that happened, and he was very sick, and he died from that. And we go to therapy to help our brains make sure that we can stay healthy. As he gets older, he'll understand more. Um, but we're very open with it. Um, there's no reason not to be in my head. Um, and again, that's kind of what really brings me to the idea that my own family had no capacity to acknowledge mental health. Um, that mixed with physical, mental abuse. I mean, it's just all around. They weren't willing to break that generational stigma,
Yeah.
and our generation is
Mm.
trying, at least,
Yeah.
speaking about it and letting other people know that somebody else is going through it. And that's all I've been trying to do since I started speaking about it is, you're not alone. It's My story can be completely different than yours. And it is. Everybody's is so much different. But I even had somebody come up to me at the event, and I mentioned at the event, once I got onto the right medication, I was cooking eggs one morning and I thought to myself, man, I haven't thought about wanting to kill myself in like a few hours. That's crazy, and to just always be that person who, it was my normal life to walk around and have these suicidal thoughts. And you could have the thoughts and not have a plan. And when you do that for so long, you get so used to it, and the medication stopped a lot of that. And people don't always believe that it can happen. And so for a lot of other people who have never experienced regular suicidal thoughts or ideation, or I always say the word wrong, but again, people kind of like gasp back at like, you just would want to kill yourself on a Tuesday. And it's like, yeah, my brain just physically does that. But medication can help. You don't have to stay like that. It's hard. It's very hard work, but it's worth it. Um, and I mean, that's where now, like I said, I'm 3 years in as far as mental health goes. Do I have really crappy days? Absolutely. Do I have times where I really don't want to be at therapy? Absolutely. I've walked out of therapy before, but that's a part of the process, is having somebody there who can accept everything that's just word vomiting coming out of your mouth and helping you sit with it. Even on the days where you feel like you're not saying anything of value, which you do. I mean, after 3 years, I see her every week. I see her more than I see, friends on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But there's always something that, you can sit with, and they can give you some type of perspective outside of anybody in your life. Everybody needs therapy.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Oh,
matter,
100% agree. Yes.
Yeah, and I say, like, there's so many different kinds.
Mhm.
Not everybody needs to go their whole life. Not everybody needs to go every week. I have friends who started because she went through a miscarriage, and on a normal level of her life, she has managing, she's able to manage her day to day. And then that happened, and she was completely different, and she couldn't understand why. And she was open to going to see a therapist. And I'm like, I believe you really need somebody to help you. You have to sit with it. You can't just pretend like these things didn't happen. It's the same whether it's, you have emotional trauma, or if you're going through a divorce, or if you lose a child, or um, you just have bad days sometimes. To have somebody who's completely out of your realm of life that you can trust 100% is amazing.
Yeah.
Even people ask me now, they're like, well, why is your son in therapy? I'm like, why does he need a reason to be in therapy? You don't need a reason to have somebody. Does he need to go multiple times a week? For him, no. do other people? Some of them do. He goes now, he does have he has higher anxiety. And for me, he is my mini me.
Mm.
And so while my anger and impulsive and irritability comes from trauma, your kids mimic you. And he has very big emotions to begin with. He's just that type of child, but having somebody else help with him learning his big emotions for us has been amazing, because even me as somebody who advocates, and I've been slowly going to school for social work, so, and psychology in general just really intrigues me. But to talk to somebody who you have a relationship with, as far as like mother to child or even friend to friend, you're not always able to be 100% open. You think you are, but sometimes it's just not the truth. Or you know what? Sometimes that's the person that's really making you uncomfortable or angry. And I want him, as he grows, kids go through real weird phases.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I think back to my 9-10-year-old self who started with the big emotions, or my 13-year-old self who, for the first time I tried to kill myself, or my 20-year-old self. And I think how many times like having somebody that I just had like my back no matter what would have been amazing. And so I hope to give him that. And I hope that, the more I talk about it, and the more we have people even like you who are willing to take the time out of your day to help bring the stigma down. To me, in my head, there's no reason for there to be suicide. It's not a car accident. It's not cancer. This is something that mental health will always be here. But if our health idea around it is the same, you have cancer, you will get it treated. You break your bone, you go and you get it treated. Nobody's going to question why you're getting it treated. And with mental health, you can go and be treated, between the stigmas and some of the difficulties right now, even just getting in places.
Oh, yes.
Is very difficult. But it's so preventable. And even if I always say, if my story helps anybody, I'm glad I said it. And I've had people, I haven't talked to in years, who will message me and tell me, thank you. Like, you don't know what you did, but thank you. And like every time I get one of those, I just sit there and I just cry a little bit, because it's not as hard for me anymore, but I know that they're still in it. But again, I'm just happy that I'm able to, I'm here. There's just so much good that can happen. As long as we keep trying, breaking down the stigmas. And then like we were talking about too, I know, holidays coming up.
Such a tough time for so many. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were talking about how you always hear like blood is thicker than water. That's your family. You only get one of them. I only get one of me. I only get one of my life.
Amen.
Why am I going to take another Thanksgiving away from me and my family that I've created, by being very anxious the whole time, or putting on the show that I don't want to have to put on. I have a Friendsgiving coming up, and I am so excited that I could look at the people that are in my life, and I'm like, I created this family. I have these people that are in my family that I love so much, and I know they love me. I love their children. They love my child. We bicker and we argue, just like any other family. We all have our own dynamics, just like any other family, but we as a group are mentally healthy for each other. I don't think twice about going there. I am so excited for Friendsgiving that we're having. We have our own little menu set out, where our kids love getting together and they talk about these times. And it's just, if you're not ready to cut those holidays, that's okay. But try limiting yourself then. I did that for a little bit. And this is all thankfully from my therapist. I'm slightly giving out some of her secrets. But, for a while I just cut it down where I'm like, okay, we're just going to stop by for about an hour. And then the more and more you get there and you realize you didn't need that, you could start changing things to be happier and healthier. I'm not dreading Thanksgiving Day. Me, my husband, and my son get to be together. We can eat whatever we want. We don't have to put on a show for anybody. People aren't pulling at you wanting pictures to post on, Facebook or Instagram.
Look how happy we are.
Yes, look how happy we are. Yes. And it's just, I really cannot stand that it's just pushed down so many people's throats that you need to spend that time together.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people also just don't want to spend it alone. And I get that too. And for me, that part, that's where you do have to put yourself out there sometimes, your authentic self, to find the people that love you for you and that who you love. It doesn't have to be your blood family. That idea needs to be kind of wrecked. Do I think you should fight if you have a pretty good relationship? Absolutely. Fight for it. If you have people, everybody is willing to, work on themselves to be better. Absolutely. If there's not a fight in anybody else and you're the one who keeps pushing, you're not going to get very far pushing at the wall by yourself. You have to remember to give yourself and put yourself first. If you have children, put you and your children first, your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is. It's not necessary. We only have so long. We only have so many Thanksgivings, so many Christmases. Even losing my brother, I think that guilted me into it for a few years. And now it's like, I have no reason not to be happy. It's a big part. And I mean, I know a lot of people, it's way easier said than done, obviously.
Yeah.
But I mean, I hope somebody thinks about it. Maybe it's 10 Thanksgivings from now, but if they're really toxic, and you also don't need to be toxic back. You could just simply, no, I'm not attending this year. See how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe they are going to be toxic, but you could just leave it at that. Try something new. Go for sushi.
Exactly.
I actually asked my son, I'm like, what should we make for Thanksgiving? I know I want canned cranberry sauce, and that's it. That's all I care about.
Now you make a really good point, and I think this goes along with the stigma too. It's certainly, besides the stigma, which exists and is challenging, that we have this hard time still talking about mental health. We have this facade that goes on, with commercialism and the movies and commercials, and like, this is where you have to be with your family, and then you feel guilt. A lot of people, I know I have the Catholic guilt for a lot of things, but like, you feel that if you don't go, you're a bad person. And even though if you're going, sometimes for some people it's like, oh my gosh, it gives you anxiety going, and it makes you anxious, or it makes you feel bad if certain personalities, if there's certain like family issues or whatever, but yet you'll still go because you feel you have to. That whole idea, like you're saying, should be removed. It's like, family is who you want to spend your time with. And we've heard this before, but I don't know why. One day, a couple weeks ago, it really struck a chord with me. I was listening to Tig Notaro. She's a comedian who's been through cancer, losing her mother, and having a serious intestinal disease, all within like so many months. So she really appreciates life. And she had a podcast where she had on Kristen Bell, an actress, and they were talking about something very lighthearted about going to a neighbor's party. And the person, it was a writer who called in or whatever, who's like, oh, but I feel guilty, I should go. And the way they said it just struck such a chord. Like, you don't have to do things that you don't want to do. And you don't owe people an explanation. And
Yeah,
that really hit me too, because I'm like, again, the Catholic guilt, and I'm an over explainer. And oh, well, I didn't because of this and that. And it's like, you know what?
you
Unless,
don't need it.
yeah, you don't have to. I mean, if you have a commitment, keep it, right? Or explain to someone, you know what? I apologize. I can't do this, even though I told you I would be helping you learn to drive, or I would be helping you get your groceries or whatever. That's different. If you take accountability. But if someone invites you somewhere and you don't want to go, you don't have to go.
Yeah. You don't have to be emotionally there for them. You don't have to be um anything to anybody. Like you said, there's things where, if you've set dates or times, but I'll say even in that point, sometimes I've texted somebody, or I rarely call, to be honest. I hate phone calls. But I'll just say I'm not well today. I'm not capable of that right now. And that's okay. And it's the same way with any type of holiday or birthdays or the social connections that people think are necessary. It's simply, I won't be there this year. Well, why? I'm just, it's my year to do what I need to do. Yeah. And some people might keep saying why and why and why and make a big deal of it. And you know what? Let them carry that. There's no reason for you to, it's your choice. You're a human.
Yeah. Yeah, we have choices, and it's tough though. I think it's hard for people because, like you're saying, the person, and I've experienced this, family members, it's not that they mean any harm. They mean well, but it's like, well, why aren't you coming? Why aren't you coming? And really that's more about their needs, right? They want certain
Yes.
needs met, even if they barely have time to talk to you that day, but they want you there because it's part of a feeling or a dream or what it should be. But that's their concern or their feelings or whatever. As long as you're respectful, it's like, no, I don't want to go. It's okay to have your own feelings and put yourself first. No, I'm not going to be there, and that's it.
Yeah. And if they can't respect that, then again, that's on them. They can hold on to that. And you learn very quickly when you start putting yourself first, who is really meant to be in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a lot I mean, I think a lot of us go through the motion so much that putting yourself first is still a relatively new idea.
Hard. It's
Yeah.
very, very hard.
Yeah.
Very hard to speak up. It's very hard to take control and not just fall right back into that same rhythm of people pleasing.
Mm.
Um, I feel like when a lot of the time for our generation, if you are not people pleasing, you're sometimes taken as rude or mean. Um, and it's not that, and that's where I've let other people believe, if you can't accept the fact that I'm not attending, or that I emotionally just can't handle, the drama right now, or the issues, then that's your problem. Unfortunately, just, you could either respect it or you don't, but either way, I won't be there.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you just two more. So first of all, I want to say again, I didn't say it, but I am truly sorry for the loss of your brother, and for everything that you've experienced. First, I want to ask, is there anything you'd want people to know about him or remember, or something that you think of when you think of him, something fondly that you'd want people to know?
He was that person that was the happy one. Everything was always smiling and joking, and he had that smile that, like, he didn't really want you to see his smile. And if you knew Eric, you would know exactly what I was talking about. Um, you have to look so much deeper for people, sometimes to really know what they're struggling with. Um, but he was me in a boy form. And I learned that too, as I have learned more about myself, is how similar we were with our emotions, and um, hiding them very, very well. Um, but people called him sunshine. He was just happy. Um, to anybody else, I knew, like, that was our relationship, is we both knew we struggled. Um, but we didn't speak about it because we were never taught how to. But for him and I, we had that connection of, just knowing sometimes, like, hey, do you want to come over? we won't talk about anything, but let's just watch football together. It's just, um, yeah, he's my baby brother who was way taller than me. He's taller than all of us, but it's just such a shame that we lose so many people this way.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So, and also the other thing I wanted to ask you about, and I think you've kind of already addressed it, as far as your self-care, what's helping you? You've mentioned therapy, and then getting on the right medicine. And I know I've had Gab Benesso is phenomenal. She's in Pittsburgh. She's a mental health advocate. She's a comedian. She'll be coming here to Scranton in the spring. She talked similarly about that because she said she's been through therapists and some of them were not helpful to her, but she's got a great one right now that she loves, and medicines and diagnoses have been through the years have not been right on. And now she's doing real well. She's found the right therapy, the right medicine. So that's all important. We've mentioned your pets, your dogs, and how loving they and helpful they are to your mental health. Is there anything else that you would say about self-care that you would offer someone as just something maybe they would want to try?
For me, I am one of those, I always say, like a divergent creative. For me, it's keeping busy. If the idle hands thing, I love trying new things. Usually it's crafts. I actually just cleaned my giant craft table. For some people it's working out, and I actually love working out if I get there. um, it is wonderful. Um, I am not a bath person. I've also learned things like that. Like the idea of self-care is also very different for people. You're forced into take a bath. That'll make you relax. That does not make me relax in the slightest. I am not. But for me, I'll do the same idea that people put in as far as light candles. People get bath bombs. Well, guess what? There's shower bombs too. Keep the lights really low. You could still do that if you have a shower. Sometimes it's simple things like that for people for their self-care that they don't realize. Again, you don't need to conform to the idea of it. You also don't have to be good at what you're doing for it to be fun. I'm not the greatest painter, but you know what? I paint a lot. You don't have to be great at something for it to make you feel good, and to let you kind of just disappear a little bit from reality. Sometimes that's what you need, to just really let things go for a few minutes. And we let the boys, when we go on hikes, just scream in the woods. Sometimes that's great. We broke a bunch of pumpkins the other day, and that was so much fun. We were in the middle of the woods, and it was a little thing set up with a bunch of pumpkins. And you know what? The deer probably loved it afterwards. And we loved taking them and just smashing them off of things. Rage rooms, I think they're still a thing.
I so want to try one of those.
I do too.
I break things by accident, but I want to break things for real.
Right. Yes. I have things as silly as those, like monkey, everybody calls them different things, but monkey noodles. It's like a little rubbery thing that even just that and sitting while watching a movie, for me, it keeps me so much more grounded. It's trying so many different things, and like I said, some things you may not be good at, but you just keep trying it. You don't ever have to be great at it. That's a big thing that I feel like society tells you, like, if you're not good at it, stop. Like, why? If it makes you feel good, keep doing it. There's no reason not to. I write a lot. I don't know if you ever heard of Elephant Journal. If you haven't, you should definitely look.
Elephant Journal. Huh.
Yes, I think you would love that. It's like a community-based writing, and it does have a lot of mental health. But it's anybody can write. They do have editors that'll go over things. I've written for them for a few. I'm in the middle of writing 2 different books. Again, like I said, I have a lot of things. For my mind, that's what I need, is just multiple outlets, just for how I'm feeling that day. And I'm not great at all things, but I am good at some, and they all help in different ways.
That's great. And I love what you're saying though. It's like, and I think this has come out, even I heard the folks at New Roots Recovery when we, with the King's College project we're working on, we got to talk to Kristen there and a certified recovery specialist. And they said something similar as far as the recovery for substance abuse, substance use disorder, that not everything's going to be the same for the same every person. Like, like they offer the yoga and meditation and the community gardening. And Kristen had said, we know that, you're going to try something and say, maybe you don't like it. That's okay. Try something else. The key is just keep trying things. And like you said,
Yeah.
if you enjoy it, it's not, you're not trying to win a medal. It's like, if you enjoy it, keep doing it. And if you don't enjoy something, then try something else. Just
Yeah.
keep trying.
I love coloring. My friend can't do coloring because it makes her anxious that she can't get it perfect. So we all have different things, but just if you see something, try it out. It might be your new favorite hobby that you turn to on a really rough day to just reset your brain. Being able to have a reset is like the best thing in the world. And you know what? It might even just be laying on the couch with your dog or your cat or whatever it is that you have. That alone can reset a lot. If you have kids, sometimes the kids are great ways to reset, and other times, sometimes you just have to say, I need some time to myself. It's very difficult. It's also it's a two-way street of, learning to not feel guilty for that part and taking the time for yourself. I've had to struggle with that. I do need a few hours. It's not a 15-minute thing. Sometimes it is a 15-minute thing. I think just reminding yourself there's no right or wrong way to do it, but reminding yourself to put yourself first sometimes, in everything, any way possible. The world doesn't always have to be taking from you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's like that when I do laughter yoga sessions, and one of my activities, they talk about, like I say, life's been pretty turbulent, we're going to do some laughter to kind of like relieve the stress. But I always use the analogy with like bumpiness or turbulence on a plane. What do they say? Put your own mask on first, if the oxygen mask falls, before you try to assist anyone else. And I love that using that and reminding people, if you don't take care of yourself, what will you have to give anyone else anyway? So it's not selfish. I mean, yes, by definition, you could say it's selfish, but it's self-care, it's self-preservation, so that you can help other people in your life that you want to help, your family, your friends, that, community, if you're involved in the community. But you have to take care of yourself too, or else if you get burned out, that's it. You only, like you said before, I think you only get one you. And I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't pour from an empty cup. So you have to make sure you're, I want to be that person for my son, but to be that person, I have to take care of myself sometimes. It's rough, but it's worth it. You got to process a lot of things and sit with certain things to slowly change. Very small changes can really add up, and they become normal. Then all of a sudden, you learn to not feel the guilt for needing to put yourself first, or all of a sudden you don't feel as anxious about having to tell somebody that you're not showing up to something because you've done it a few times. You get used to it.
Yeah. Yeah. But like you said, practice. That's right. It's just
Practice. Yes.
Yep. Practice.
Better word.
Practice makes perfect. Although we're not looking for perfection, because that's more stressful, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me this week. Is there anything else? And, I'll be happy to put in, if there's certain websites or, organizations that you recommend or that you support, I'll be happy to put those in the notes for the podcast and when I promote it. But anything in closing that you wanted to say that you didn't feel you had the opportunity to say, or that you might just be remembering now?
No, I mean, I definitely talked for a very nice long time, but it's nice to be able to just tell, any story. But to definitely be able to get words like suicide or mental health out into the community. And there are ways of getting help. Sometimes it is really hard. It's not going to be easy. And I know that stops a lot of people, is that initial, not hearing back from a therapist, or that first medication not working, but keep trying. It's, if it was easy, we would be in a lot better situations, but um, having more and more people who are on the other side can only make this even better for more. So small changes.
Okay. That's great advice again. And as we said before, sometimes you have to try a couple things before you get it right. And that's okay. It's worth it. I mean, look at you're here today and it's worth it. So
Yes.
um I want to thank you again so much. And I appreciate you being so open and honest. But like you said, we need to get these words out there. Let's talk about mental health. Let's talk about suicide. So let's prevent it. So thank you again, Brittany Walter, for sharing your story. To my listeners, I say thank you. And I will put some information in the show notes too about suicide hotline. And, if you do need help, please talk to someone, please get it, because you're definitely, every life is worth saving. And, I'm sure you have talents and things that the world needs to help make it a brighter place. So thank you for listening. As I always say to my listeners, I thank you from the bottom of my heart and from the bottom of my wine glass.